Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are diving into a topic that is as complex as it is critical. The new global nuclear arms race. This isn't your grandfather's Cold War. The old rules are gone. And what's emerging is a far more unpredictable and dangerous landscape. To really understand what's happening now, we need to look back at how we got here. For nearly half a century, the world lived under the shadow of a nuclear standoff between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. This era was defined by a terrifyingly stable concept known as mutually assured destruction, or MAD. The logic was simple, if chilling. If either side launched a nuclear attack, the other would retaliate with overwhelming force, ensuring the total annihilation of both. It was a balance of terror, but it was a balance nonetheless. To manage this existential threat, Washington and Moscow painstakingly negotiated a series of landmark arms control treaties. Agreements like the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, or SALT, and later the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaties known as START, placed verifiable limits on the number of nuclear warheads and delivery systems each side could possess. These weren't just documents. They were the guardrails of global security, complete with on-site inspections and data exchanges that built a fragile, yet essential layer of trust and predictability. One of the most crucial of these was the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or the INF Treaty. This agreement was groundbreaking because it didn't just limit a class of weapons, it eliminated them entirely. The INF Treaty banned all land-based missiles with ranges between 500 and 5,500 kilometers. These were the weapons considered most destabilizing for Europe, as they could strike major cities with very little warning time. Getting rid of them was seen as a massive step away from the nuclear brink. Then, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, and the Cold War officially ended. It felt like the world could finally breathe a collective sigh of relief. The immediate threat of a global nuclear holocaust seemed to recede. Throughout the 1990s and into the early 2000s, this sense of optimism largely continued. The US and the newly formed Russian Federation carried on with arms control, with agreements like New START continuing the process of reducing their massive arsenals. Russia, grappling with economic turmoil and a diminished global standing, saw its conventional military forces decline significantly. For a time, it relied more heavily on its nuclear arsenal as the ultimate guarantor of its sovereignty, but the general trend was one of reduction and de-escalation. The United States, now the world's sole superpower, also made unilateral cuts to its nuclear stockpile. The focus of global security shifted towards counterterrorism, rogue states, and non-proliferation, preventing new countries from getting the bomb, rather than managing the superpower arsenals. It seemed for a while that the specter of great power nuclear competition had been relegated to the history books. But this period of calm was, unfortunately, just a lull before a new storm. The foundation of that post-Cold War stability began to crack in the 21st century. The trust and cooperation that underpinned the old arms control regime started to erode, replaced by growing suspicion and rivalry. A pivotal moment came in 2019 when the United States officially withdrew from the INF Treaty. The US accused Russia of violating the treaty for years by developing and deploying a prohibited cruise missile, the 9mm 729. Russia denied the accusation and, in turn, claimed that U.S. missile defense systems in Europe could be repurposed to launch offensive missiles, violating the spirit of the treaty. Regardless of who was right, the result was the same. The treaty collapsed. A critical guardrail preventing a new missile race in Europe was gone. This wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a broader pattern of decaying arms control. Shortly after, Russia suspended its participation in the New START Treaty, the last remaining agreement limiting American and Russian strategic nuclear arsenals. Russia cited the United States' unwavering support for Ukraine as a key reason, arguing it couldn't allow U.S. inspections of its nuclear sites, while Washington was, in its view, waging a proxy war against it. With the suspension of New START, the entire system of verification and mutual inspection, the very heart of arms control, has ground to a halt. For the first time in decades, there are no limits and no eyes on the strategic nuclear forces of the world's two largest nuclear powers. This lack of transparency and predictability has created a security vacuum. one that is rapidly being filled by a renewed and unconstrained arms race. Both nations are now free to build up their arsenals without any treaty-based limitations, leading to a dangerous action-reaction cycle fueled by worst-case scenario planning. But this isn't just a rerun of the US-Soviet dynamic. The strategic equation has been fundamentally and irreversibly altered by the rise of a third major player, China. During the Cold War, China's nuclear arsenal was relatively small and primarily aimed at deterring an attack. It maintained a minimum deterrence posture. That is no longer the case. Today, China is in the midst of the most significant and rapid expansion and modernization of its nuclear forces in its history. According to the Pentagon, China is on track to possess over 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030, a dramatic increase from its stockpile of a few hundred just a few years ago. But it's not just about numbers. China is also building a modern and diverse triad of nuclear delivery systems: land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles, a growing fleet of nuclear-powered submarines capable of launching missiles, and nuclear-capable bombers. They're constructing hundreds of new missile silos in their western deserts, developing hypersonic glide vehicles that can evade missile defenses, and expanding their naval and air capabilities. This transforms the global strategic landscape from a two-body problem into a three-body problem. The old bilateral logic of arms control, where two sides could balance each other, simply doesn't work anymore. Now the United States finds itself in an unprecedented strategic dilemma. It must simultaneously deter two major nuclear-armed rivals, Russia and China, who are increasingly cooperating with each other. This three-way dynamic is inherently less stable. Every move the U.S. makes to counter China's buildup might be seen by Russia as a threat, and vice versa. Every advance by China or Russia forces the U.S. to reconsider its own force posture, fueling a cycle of escalation that is much harder to control than the bilateral race of the past. We have entered a new, more crowded, and far more complicated nuclear age, where three major powers are all racing to modernize and expand their arsenals at the same time, without the guardrails of treaties to guide them. We're diving into the heart of the new arms race, the mind-bending technologies that are rewriting the rules of warfare and threatening the fragile peace we've known for decades. The star of this unsettling show? Hypersonic weapons. So, what exactly are we talking about? Imagine a weapon traveling at Mach 5 or faster. That's 5 times the speed of sound, or about 1 mile per second. At that speed, you could fly from New York to Los Angeles in under an hour. But it's not just the sheer velocity that's causing strategists to lose sleep. It's the combination of speed and maneuverability. There are two main types of these weapons. First, you have hypersonic glide vehicles, or HGVs. These are launched on a rocket, much like a traditional ballistic missile. But once they reach the upper atmosphere, they detach and glide towards their target, capable of making sharp, unpredictable turns along the way. Think of it as a skipping stone on a pond, but the stone is traveling at thousands of miles per hour and can change its path mid-skip. The second type is the hypersonic cruise missile, or HCM. These are more like super-fast, air-breathing jets. They are powered by advanced engines like scramjets that suck in atmospheric air at incredible speeds to fuel their flight. They fly at lower altitudes than HGVs but are just as fast and maneuverable, hugging the terrain to avoid detection. Now, why is this such a game changer? The core principle of Cold War deterrence, mutually assured destruction, or MAD, relied on a simple, terrifying certainty. If one side launched a nuclear attack, the other would see it coming and have enough time to launch a devastating counterattack. Ballistic missiles fly on a predictable, arched trajectory. You can track them, calculate their target, and, in theory, intercept them. Hypersonic weapons shatter this certainty. Their ability to maneuver in flight makes their trajectory completely unpredictable. Existing missile defense systems, which are designed to intercept targets on a foreseeable path, are rendered almost obsolete. They simply can't calculate where the weapon is going to be in the next few seconds, let alone position an interceptor to stop it. This dramatically shortens warning times, compressing the decision-making window for a national leader from 20-30 minutes down to just a few minutes, or even less. When you have mere moments to decide whether you're under nuclear attack and whether to retaliate, the pressure to launch on warning or even to strike first in a crisis becomes immense. The fear is that if you wait to confirm an attack, it might be too late, as your own command and control centers and retaliatory forces could be wiped out before you can even react. This is what we mean when we say hypersonics destabilize strategic deterrence. They make a first strike more tempting and a catastrophic miscalculation more likely. Leading this technological charge has been Russia. President Putin has been very public about what he calls his super weapons, designed explicitly to circumvent U.S. missile defenses. A prime example is the Avangard system. This is a hypersonic glide vehicle that Russia claims can travel at speeds exceeding Mach 20 and make sharp evasive maneuvers on its way to a target. It's reportedly deployed on top of their existing intercontinental ballistic missiles, giving it global reach. Moscow's message is clear. No matter how advanced your shields are, our sword can get through. Another of these systems, and perhaps one of the most dystopian, is the Poseidon. This isn't a missile but a massive, nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed underwater drone. Think of it as a giant, autonomous torpedo. It's designed to travel intercontinental distances, creeping along the ocean floor to avoid detection, before detonating its multi-megaton warhead near a coastal city or a naval base. The goal is not just the initial blast, but also to create a radioactive tsunami that would render vast coastal areas uninhabitable for decades. It's a weapon of pure terror, designed to be a doomsday retaliatory strike that cannot be stopped. But Russia isn't the only major player. China's progress in this field has been nothing short of breathtaking. For years, China pursued a doctrine of minimum deterrence, maintaining a small but credible nuclear force just large enough to deter an attack. That's changing, and fast. Satellite imagery and intelligence reports show a massive expansion of China's nuclear arsenal, including the construction of hundreds of new missile silos in its western desert. Coupled with this buildup is their own advanced hypersonic program. Their most notable system is the DF-17, a medium-range missile topped with a DF-ZF hypersonic glide vehicle. While its range is regional rather than intercontinental, it poses a direct threat to U.S. naval assets like aircraft carriers and military bases throughout the Pacific. For the U.S. Navy, which has been the dominant force in the region for decades, a weapon that can strike a moving carrier from over 1,000 miles away with little to no warning is a profound challenge. China's goal is to secure its nuclear deterrent and push U.S. forces further from its coastline, creating a buffer zone where its military holds the upper hand. Faced with these developments, the United States has found itself in a difficult position, playing catch-up in a race it once led. For years, U.S. research into hypersonics was focused on non-nuclear, conventional precision strikes. The idea was to be able to hit any target on Earth within an hour. But as Russia and China began weaponizing their systems, the focus in Washington shifted dramatically. The Pentagon is now pouring billions of dollars into a multitude of programs to both develop its own offensive hypersonic weapons and, crucially, to create defenses against them. The U.S. Army, Navy, and Air Force all have their own distinct hypersonic missile programs in development, like the Army's Long-Range Hypersonic Weapon and the Air Force's ARRW program. The goal is twofold. First, to restore deterrence by demonstrating that the U.S. also possesses these advanced capabilities, and second, to close what is perceived as a dangerous technological gap. On the defensive side, the challenge is immense. The Missile Defense Agency is working on a new architecture of sensors, including a network of satellites in low Earth orbit, to provide a global, persistent, birth-to-death tracking of hypersonic threats. The idea is that if you can't predict the missile's path, you have to track it continuously in real time. Then you need a new kind of interceptor, something fast and agile enough to engage a target that's actively maneuvering at Mach 5 or more. It's a monumental technological undertaking, and success is far from guaranteed. What we are witnessing is a classic security dilemma, supercharged by 21st century technology. Every move one nation makes to enhance its security is seen as a threat by its rivals, prompting them to develop even more advanced countermeasures. Russia develops the Avangard to defeat U.S. defenses. The U.S. responds by trying to build new defenses and its own offensive hypersonics. China, watching this, accelerates its own programs to ensure it isn't left behind. The result is a dangerous, spiraling competition that makes everyone less safe. The stability of the Cold War, terrifying as it was built on a foundation of mutual understanding and predictability. That foundation is now cracking under the strain of these new, lightning-fast and unpredictable weapons. We are entering a new, more complex, and arguably more dangerous strategic era, one where the margin for error is razor-thin and the consequences of failure are as unthinkable as ever. The Cold War's two-player chess match has morphed into a chaotic three-body problem, and the board itself is expanding. This new nuclear arms race isn't happening in a vacuum. It's deeply intertwined with a much broader battle for global supremacy, fought across every conceivable domain. Think of it as integrated competition. While warheads are being modernized, another quieter arms race is accelerating in the digital realm. The race for artificial intelligence. The same AI that promises to revolutionize our lives is also being developed to command and control weapons systems, analyze battlefield data at inhuman speeds, and potentially one day make life or death decisions. This isn't science fiction. It's the strategic frontier. Militaries are pouring billions into AI, creating autonomous systems and cyber weapons that can disrupt an adversary's command and control networks. Imagine the danger. A cyber attack cripples a nation's early warning satellites. In the fog of war, do they assume it's a conventional attack or the prelude to a nuclear first strike? This integration of AI and cyber warfare into nuclear strategy introduces terrifying new variables. It shortens decision times from minutes to seconds and creates pathways for miscalculation that the architects of the Cold War could never have imagined. A bug in a piece of code, a hacked command system, or an AI making a logical but catastrophically wrong inference could trigger an irreversible chain of events. The stability that was once precariously maintained by human-to-human communication and verification is being eroded by the speed and complexity of machines. This isn't just about building better bombs anymore. It's about building faster, smarter, and potentially uncontrollable systems to wield them. The contest for technological dominance in AI and cyber is now as critical as the nuclear balance itself, making the entire global security architecture more fragile than ever. The risk isn't just a deliberate first strike, but an accidental apocalypse sparked by a ghost in the machine. This escalation among the big three, the US, Russia, and China, sends powerful shockwaves across the entire globe. International relations don't operate on a do as I say, not as I do basis. When the world's most powerful nations openly declare that more numerous and more sophisticated nuclear weapons are essential for their security, other countries listen, and they learn. This creates a dangerous ripple effect, a global security dilemma where one nation's defensive move is seen as an offensive threat by another, compelling them to respond in kind. Look at the established nuclear powers beyond the big three. India and Pakistan, locked in a perpetual state of tension, are closely watching China's rapid expansion. As China builds up its arsenal, citing the need to deter the United States, India inevitably feels its own strategic deterrent is weakened. This pressures New Delhi to modernize and potentially expand its own nuclear forces, which in turn sets off alarm bells in Islamabad, compelling Pakistan to keep pace. It's a chain reaction of insecurity. Then there's North Korea, a state that has staked its very survival on its nuclear program. The global emphasis on nuclear weapons only validates Kim Jong-un's strategy, making denuclearization seem like a naive fantasy. Why would he give up his arsenal when the world's superpowers are racing to build more of their own? Beyond these existing nuclear states, there's the even more worrying prospect of proliferation. Countries that currently sit under the U.S. nuclear umbrella, like Japan, South Korea, or even nations in Europe, might begin to question the credibility of that guarantee. If they perceive the U.S. as too preoccupied with Russia and China, or if the regional balance of power shifts too dramatically, the temptation to develop their own indigenous nuclear deterrent could become irresistible. This is the ultimate nightmare scenario. A world not with 9 nuclear states but with a dozen or 20, each with their own regional conflicts and flashpoints. Every new nuclear-armed nation exponentially increases the chances of these weapons being used, whether through conflict, accident, or even a state collapse where weapons could fall into the wrong hands. The most immediate and terrifying danger in this new era isn't a deliberate, bolt-from-the-blue nuclear attack. It's the rapidly increasing risk of miscalculation. The intricate web of treaties, communication hotlines, and mutual understanding that helped prevent disaster during the Cold War has been systematically dismantled. We are flying blind in a hurricane. Key arms control treaties like the INF Treaty, which banned intermediate-range missiles, are gone. This means Russia can deploy weapons capable of striking European capitals with little warning, and the U.S. is developing its own to counter threats in the Pacific. These are high-speed, hard-to-track weapons, including hypersonics, that compress an enemy's decision-making time from a survivable 30 minutes to a frantic 5. In a crisis, there is no time to check the data, no time for a phone call, no time to think. There's only time to react or risk losing everything. This hair-trigger posture is happening against a backdrop of the most intense geopolitical friction in decades. The war in Ukraine has shattered relations between Russia and the West. Rhetoric from Moscow has repeatedly and openly flirted with the nuclear option, attempting to use its arsenal to coerce and intimidate. Every new battlefield setback for Russia raises the terrifying question of just how desperate Putin might become. Simultaneously, in the Indo-Pacific, tensions over Taiwan are at a boiling point. China views the island as a renegade province, while the United States is committed to helping it defend itself. Military drills, close encounters between warships and aircraft, and increasingly aggressive rhetoric from both sides create a tinderbox. Imagine a naval accident in the Taiwan Strait, or a clash between fighter jets. In this hyper-tense atmosphere, could such an incident be misinterpreted as the opening salvo of a major war? Would leaders armed with hypersonic weapons and AI-driven battle management systems feel pressured to escalate before they even understood what was happening? This is the new reality. A world with more actors, more complex weapons, shattered communication lines, and multiple active flashpoints. It's a formula not for stability, but for catastrophic, unintended escalation. So where does this leave us? We are standing at a precipice, staring into an abyss of our own making. The United States, Russia, and China are locked in a new, multi-domain arms race that is fundamentally different and, in many ways, more dangerous than the one that defined the 20th century. The old logic of mutually assured destruction, which provided a perverse form of stability, is being replaced by a relentless pursuit of strategic advantage. This isn't about balance anymore. It's about winning. Each side is seeking a technological or doctrinal edge that would allow it to fight and theoretically prevail in a nuclear conflict, a concept that is patently insane. This competitive mindset prioritizes national ambition over global survival, making the essential work of arms control more difficult, yet more vital, than at any point since the Cuban Missile Crisis. We need a new framework for the 21st century, one that brings China to the negotiating table, acknowledges the disruptive impact of new technologies like AI and hypersonics, and reestablishes clear, reliable channels of communication to de-escalate crises before they spiral out of control. We need to revive the global understanding that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. The path forward is fraught with difficulty. The trust has evaporated, and the geopolitical rivalry is intense. But the alternative is to continue down this road, accelerating a race toward a finish line that is nothing short of global catastrophe. The fate of civilization depends on pulling back from the brink, on rediscovering the shared wisdom that our common survival is more important than any single nation's supremacy. The challenge is immense, but inaction is not an option. The clock is ticking, closer to midnight than we have been in generations, and it is our collective responsibility to try and turn it back.